Yo, 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 welcome to the Fit and Faith podcast. I am so excited to be back again. I guess again, because I was literally live just a little bit ago. But this podcast is going to be unique in quality. And I'm so excited to dive into everything that is Jeremy Slate and the process of what he's done, not only in his career, but also in his life and how he has created his own based on the Create Your Own Life podcast. And you guys have to know that it was #1 in new iTunes category and number 78 in the top 100 of iTunes. Pretty rad, pretty quality material right there. And so 910 episodes in, I'm 100 and something. So I'm here to learn and be a student. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
It's going to be a good one. So I got introduced to you through Glenn Lundy a couple of weeks ago, as we clarified right before the show. And one of the things that you said that was brought back to memory was that purpose doesn't slap you in the face. And I was like, yes, that is so good. Unpack that for us a little bit. And let's talk about your own purpose discovery.
Yeah, well, I will say, first of all, I was sporting my Rise and Grind T-shirt over the weekend. So shout out to Glenn for sending that out to me.
Nice.
But I'll say one of the big things that I've seen, and I don't know if you've noticed this. So like I'm 34, so I fall like kind of into that millennial generation, and I find that for some reason, I don't know when this changed, because like my upbringing was never like that. But I feel like a lot of people think that they're supposed to just one day find their purpose, and that's going to be the thing they do, and never work a day in your life, and blah 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 blah. But honestly, like, finding your purpose takes work, right? You got to do a lot of things you don't want to do and you don't like doing in order to find what you want to do in life. It isn't just something that you wake up and you're like, I want to be an astronaut. Like, it's not like that at all. You say, okay, so I've tried this career, I've tried that career. You know what? The career I want doesn't even exist, so I'm going to make it. But it's not just one day you wake up, the skies opens up, and the cherubim and cherubim are singing, and you kind of know your purpose. It's not like that at all.
Yeah, and that feels hard, right? Because we're such an instantaneous generation. I'm literally 34 as well. So in that millennial bracket, and it's the knowing that like we didn't hear about this growing up. There was never like school or education, even in college, about seek your purpose, go after your dream. It was like cookie cutter. You go to school, you go to college, you get out, you get a career. It's a 9 to 5. You start a 401k, all of that, which I didn't do. I went to college, didn't do the 401k job plan kind of thing. And so talk us through like your journey and evolution into understanding that.
Well, I did the sort of 401k job plan thing. Okay. It's so and it didn't really work out. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because like I come from two really hardworking blue collar parents. My mom was a beautician my whole life, and my dad was somebody that started the machine shop at a company, and with no formal training, and it worked his way up to over 40 years becoming the VP of the company, but it took 40 years to do that. So like their viewpoint on something was you find the career you want, you work really, really hard for a really long time, and eventually maybe one day you make a decent amount of money and you get a watch when you retire. And that's just not what I saw for myself.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know an alternative. So I went to undergrad. I have a double major in religious studies and Catholic theology. And didn't really know what I wanted to do when you come out, because it's kind of like didn't really have a focus on that. So I came out and I'm like, all right, so I'll get a master's degree, because what else do you do when you don't know what you want to do? So I got a master's degree in history. And then I came out in 2011, and it was a bad job market, frankly. And I wasn't really qualified to do a whole lot of anything except talk about esoteric subjects and things like that. And that was about it. So I actually worked for a year out of school, and I was managing a gym at night from like 6 to 11. And then during the day, I was painting houses, but painting houses in the way that you do everything by hand, everything. Like, we don't use sprayers or any of that kind of thing. So it was hard work. So I'd work all day, work all night, and I'd just sleep in between. And I did that for about a year. And I ran into a friend of the family that, one of the Catholic schools here in Jersey was looking for somebody to teach. And they're like, well, you don't really need the formal training or anything like that. So I ended up going into that. And I'll be honest with you, it was weird, because like there were no smartphones and things like that when I went into school. Because like I said, I'm kind of a dinosaur by today's like social media standards. And my days were like people trying to like upset me and get me on camera so they could put it on YouTube, or I think it was Snapchat at that point in time. So like that was every single day. They're like, oh, how hard can we push him today? Let's prod him a little bit and see where it goes. So I did that for about 2 years, and I was kind of getting to the end of my sanity. And in 2013, my mom ended up having a really bad stroke. And, we still have her to this day, but she is pretty disabled. So it made me look at a lot of different things I was doing in life. And I'm like, well, what do I want to do with my life? Where do I want to go? And I went through so many different things that didn't work until I eventually just started a passion project, which is the podcast. And everything I'm doing now came out of that.
That's incredible. I have a question in regards to like the transitional season of that and making those choices. Was it one of those like I'm not going to go back choices, or was like, what if I try this other thing? Maybe I'll go back.
So I guess which transition, like coming out of school or coming out of the job market?
The job market.
It was this situation of, first of all, I don't know. I was smart, but I wasn't very smart. You know what I mean? Like I was high IQ, but I wasn't applicably intelligent.
Yeah.
So my wife and I had seen this network marketing opportunity, and I know what that was. So I saw this presentation. And I thought I was going to be like, making like $1 billion in like a week. And I'm like, oh, I don't need my job. Why do I need my job? Who needs healthcare? So I quit after I saw that. Like that's how like
that's awesome.
Unready for this situation was. Yeah. It's just, but I feel like you could have taught me to do anything at that point in time, and I would have been like, all right, next thing. Because I just wasn't happy. I'd had this serious life disruption and almost losing a parent.
Yeah.
And, I myself had gotten last rites at 19, and it didn't really change my life, but it was when it was apparent that it really disrupted everything I was doing and kind of made me look at a lot of different things.
Wow.
So I think that like I was looking for something, and it could have been anything at that point in time.
How did you work through that scenario just from like a belief system? I mean, you studied religion in school. Do you practice your faith regularly?
So I wouldn't say like in an organized fashion, because I just, I think we can get too much into the practice of it and the sacrament of it rather than just, the reason we're doing this, and that's to have a connection with our creator. So for me, it's more a personal connection and a personal relationship than it is really, in an organized fashion. But it made me question a lot of things, what's happening here? Is God mad at me? Like all these different things. And you eventually realize that there's a couple different things in this, that these things happen to us so that, we continue to look, right? Because at some point we stop looking and we kind of realize like this is where life is going. And I think the other thing is, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day, we have to have these experiences because somebody that we're going to meet at some point in our life needs to hear this from you. And if you don't have that experience, you don't have that reality, you're not going to be able to help that person. So I think there's two things on that. It's that pattern interrupt. And at the same time, it's, at some point in time, there's a greater picture to this.
Yeah, I think 1,000%. I think as you were saying it, it reminded me of the Good Samaritan. And nobody ever talks about his backstory. Like who did that for him? Because likely at some point he had that exchange where it was a deposit in him to pay it forward. So I love that you said that. And I think it is so critical and crucial as you stepped into podcasting, which is also something I am so passionate about and love. I want to know, why was it Create Your Own Life podcast out the gate?
No, it was called Rock Your Life the first time around. And that was in 2014 actually.
Okay.
And it was bad. It was like really bad. Cause like at that point in time, I was still like trying to like, figure my stuff out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, all right, this network marketing thing is going to work. I'm just going to keep doing it. It's going to work at some point. Like they're telling me just trust the plan. So I'm going with it. So I had started this podcast cause I thought it was going to like, connect me with all these people and make me all this money and blah, 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 blah. And that's when it didn't go well. Yeah. So the graphic design was bad. I didn't have a microphone. So it was like, me in whatever room I was doing at that point in time, it was my kitchen. So it was like, like you couldn't really understand much of what I'm saying. And it was very life coachy, which I am the furthest thing from. So it wasn't authentic. It wasn't helpful to anyone else. And I quit that in about 60 days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I didn't start my current show.
You didn't draw it out too long.
No, I was like, this is bad. Like I had like 100 downloads and I swear like 99 of them were my mom at that point in time. So like it was that bad. So then that was in the middle of 2014. And then in 2015, I actually went with Rotary International and we did like like a mission type trip in Peru, which was pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah.
And I think the fact of just getting me out of my environment, getting me looking at something different, and getting me to, look at a different style of life. Because I think also we take a lot of things for granted here because we have everything. So because of that, I'm like, all right, well, you didn't do well the first time. It wasn't the opportunity. It was you. What are you going to do about it? And I started the podcast the second time around just because I really wanted to, learn and help. And I think that was the biggest difference. I didn't start it as even a vehicle to make money. I had gotten a job at a friend's marketing firm at that point, so I could pay my bills. So I think that was a huge difference between the first time around and the second time around.
Yeah, I love that. It's that place of service, right? Where it's just like, it is what it is. But I think a lot of times the biggest thing about podcasting is it's creating connection. It's creating affirmation. It's teaching, it's training, it's serving, it's all of these things. And people, when I teach them to podcast, the same thing, they're like, so how much money do you make? And I'm like, oh, hold on. Like, I don't even run sponsored ads.
Yeah.
And I do that with intention. Like, I don't need to. And that's not what it's about. And when I hear sponsored ads every 5 minutes, I want to go bananas. And so I think it's intentional that there's a happy medium, sure. But it's the knowing that we have a service to the person who's listening to provide quality. So you immediately went, and I think similar to me, into the interview style podcast.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, it wasn't immediately because, like I said, the first show was kind of
but
the first show was like, you could have your dreams, you can create your reality. You just got to think. Like, it was like that.
And you were like,
it was like the
26, 27?
Yeah, it was like that character from the movie Blades of Glory, John Hedder's character. It's Jimmy. If you can dream it, you can do it. It was that bad. Like, it made me sick.
Can I go back and listen? Is it still available?
Oh, no. It is luckily nowhere on the internet.
Good for you. All right. So you're round 2. And I will be transparent in the fact that I think that MLMs are also people who start that, go into the network marketing thing. They're entrepreneurs, like, right. They have that belief in themselves. They have that willingness to risk a lot of things, sometimes more than we should, in that belief of the billions, like you said. And I've done it for 4 different companies over the course of the last 14 years. And I've always loved it, but I knew that it wasn't like the one thing. There wasn't the thing that was going to be the full entirety of, like, what is Tamra's purpose, or what fulfills Tamra?
I think that's a huge part of it too. Cause I know, like, for me, like, I have some friends that, still are in different businesses and do very well doing it. It's just, it doesn't fit. It didn't fit my personality. It didn't fit like what I was able to do. And it's just, we all have our own gifts and talents, and that just wasn't really mine,
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there was also this piece of, like, I have shiny light syndrome, right? We're like, oh, that looks fun. Let's do that. I'm like a squirrel, but, like, I have gotten a lot better about discernment and making sure that I am choosing the things that are for me and not for everyone, excuse me. And so during that time, I was like, okay, here's the structure, right? It felt very structured, very like closed in, but it'll work. And I was like, I want to try this and do this. I want to try this and do this. And as I got the taste of these different opportunities, podcast being one of them, I realized that those other things just need to be laid down, and they were just more distractions than they were delivering me to the thing that I was supposed to do.
Well, I know, like, for me, like, I kept building businesses to try to make those opportunities work. It was like, all right, I will start an in-home personal training company.
Yeah, I did that.
I will, like, so I kept doing all these different things to make it work. And I'm like, all right, I just need to find what fits me as a person and my abilities and things like that. But, like, I think that's one of the reasons that I'm a huge proponent of. I see something really missing right now between high school and college. Like 100 years ago, you would have had an apprenticeship where you worked under somebody for a period of time, and that would have been 2 things: a way to really learn, or a period of discernment.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big thing that's missing, because we're not getting that experience. We're not getting that understanding and realizing, all right, that's not for me. Next thing. We put so much attention on what that thing's got to be, and that we have to know it right away.
Yeah, we're putting tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars towards it, an expectation that you're going to step out and this is what you're going to do forever. And I've had friends who have even stood in, like, guilt or shame over the fact that they are no longer doing that thing, or they couldn't pivot away from that thing because their parents paid for them to go to school. And so they're like, I have to do this. This is what I went to school for. I'm like, yeah, but you're 30, and are you going to do that for another 40 years? Well, hopefully people don't work till 70, but still, right? It's like, really, is that the mentality that we're going to have? But it's the structure that's been shown. And
Yeah.
you were exampled essentially from a blue collar perspective, right? My dad was in the military. My
Yeah.
mom was an entrepreneur. So I had a little bit of a different background.
Well, I think school is just exorbitantly like expensive now too. Like it doesn't need to cost as much as it did. Like in my opinion, I think it should be based on, really making some percentage of your salary for a few years after you're out of school, because like they would care a lot more about your ability to make money when you get out. And I think
True.
that's really, really important, rather than like, all right, it's 100,000. These are gonna be the best years of your life.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like not application after you're done. I think that's a huge missing opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. I've never even seen that presented before. I love the idea. There's a conference that's been brought to my attention that's happening here locally, and it's called, like, I think it's the third chapter is what
Mhm.
it's called, and it's this collection of ministers and pastors and people coming together to help people transition from high school, if chosen, like a vocational school, into mentorship. And really, it doesn't have to be necessarily underneath the church. It could be for people who are just in the community and have businesses and they're looking for that, like you were saying, the apprenticeship experience.
Yeah.
And really, that's where I've learned the most, even today, whenever I have
Mhm.
that opportunity to kind of lean in and glean from what they're learning. And that's the whole point of like failing forward and saying, like, I've done that before, don't do that. Right. I just don't feel like it was almost like the generation above, and maybe you can have a different experience, but the generation right above us, they didn't want to give us access to those fail forward experiences because they didn't understand that language around purpose or vulnerability. Do you think so?
I think there's a lot more at play of it than that as well.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Because like it's even the ridiculousness of every kid that plays t-ball gets a trophy. It's like
Yeah.
there's winners and losers in life, and I
Yeah.
think it was a cultural shift that
Yeah.
happened somewhere between the 80s and 90s of, you lose some, you win some, but you keep showing up. Instead, we're saying, well, you showed up and you lost big time, but it's okay because you showed up. And it's like, yeah, but eventually you should realize you should do something different if you keep showing up and failing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I think at the same time, a big part of it was a cultural shift that some of our parents didn't even have control over.
Right, right. I understand that for sure. And as I coach a lot of people who are older than me, it's
Yeah.
really interesting when I'm like sharing revelations or things that I've practiced, and it's like brand new information. Like they've
Hmm.
never read this book before. And I'm like, "What, where have you been? What rock have you been hiding under?" Like it's really interesting. But it's just they've never been exposed to it. And then once you get into that routine or cycle or rat wheel, whatever you want to call it, you're like nose down, head down on
Hmm.
the one thing. And I
Yeah.
think the cool thing about entrepreneurship, and I'm sure you've experienced this with podcasting and actually like celebrity interviews and having those experience of like what makes you tick, what makes you successful,
Hmm.
is you are being exposed to so much information.
Well, I think it's that's a really, really great point, because I have an obnoxiously weird amount of knowledge, like specialized knowledge that like in many areas of life would be of no benefit to me. But it's really helped me to keep up conversations with people of all different walks of life and areas of life. And I think because of that, like you're saying, I've been able to have richer conversations. I've been able to understand people better. Like I have a degree in ancient history. Like who does that? You know what I mean? But like, I had a conversation somebody the other day about the failures of Athenian democracy and why it didn't work and why it started to dissolve.
Wow.
But it allows you to have a wide swath of conversations with many, many different people. And I think that in itself is a really valuable thing to have.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. And I think that that's why at any given time I have a plethora of books following me around or in my Audible on queue. And I listen and consume lots of different information. And I think that that's the same way of how it should be with like our social circles. Like, who are you connected to? Oh, you're with that group. It's almost like that cool kid that floated around to all the groups in high school. And they're like, how are they friends with them? You're friends with them. You're friends with them, right? But they got along with everyone. And I think if we allowed ourselves to do that versus having just, not to say you shouldn't be specialized or an expert in something. I'm not opposed to that phrase, like methodology either, but
Yeah.
it allows the becoming of thyself. And
Yeah.
it becomes flexible versus fixed, which I just talked about in a total different perspective earlier.
But it's also like being able to communicate to a wide swath of people, which I think is important because you have a little reality. But at the same time, which in itself is a skill, but at the same time, one of the skills that I've really worked hard on, and I don't know if you've experienced this, Tamara, like one of the things that I've really worked on is you're in a conversation with somebody, you can kind of fish to see what their acceptance level are for different things, to see kind of where they stand.
Yeah.
And that allows you to kind of speak to their reality and really understand where somebody's at and actually learn more about them rather than coming at them with, well, this is what I believe and this is why you should agree. And it's so like, I have strong beliefs and things like that, but I've also learned the skill of learning how to kind of fish just a little bit, see where somebody's at so I can really communicate to them on their level of reality, because I think that's important too.
Yeah. Yeah. I also like to pull people out of their level of reality just a little bit,
Yeah.
because like you said, when you went and traveled to Peru, like it was this whole other level of awareness that you gained access to.
Well, that's an environmental shift. I think environmental shifts are so valuable because you look at your hometown, you look at the area you're from, you look at your country, wherever it is. When all of a sudden you're somewhere else and your entire reality is disrupted, you're kind of forced to be more in present time, right? You're kind of forced to be more in that space and in that reality.
100%. You said that you had that personal training background. So part of my my coming to self and coming to awareness of my, not only my faith, but also that alignment factor of understanding flow and the opportunity of flow in our life was through fitness and health and wellness. And to correlate the first conversation to this piece was, I'll take people on international retreats. And the first one that I did, I took people who had never been some people who had never been out of the country, some people who fitness and nutrition and just that mental health space is not something they ever explored. And it gave me an opportunity by shifting their entire present, like where are your feet, into a whole nother environment where they actually were willing to be that sponge again, unlike being at home, structured comfort zones. Everything is in my control. Here they had no control because I didn't even tell them what we were doing later that afternoon. But the fitness piece, talk to me about how the fitness and nutrition side of things has really helped your growth and clarity as you've continued to grow on.
Well, I think in a couple different ways. Like, it's really changed my life in a lot of different ways. Like, when I was younger, I was somebody that was really picked on, and the fitness aspect honestly just gave me more confidence. It wasn't from the perspective, because at the same time, we create a lot of what we get from other people. So just by showing up more confident, you have a better experience. At least it's, I can only say from what I've lived, because that's what I understand. So it really helped me in that way. The other aspect too is I had been a wrestler my whole life, and you don't really develop some very good dietary habits wrestling because you're always trying to make a certain weight or things like that. And, I'd naturally be 150 pounds, but I'd be trying to wrestle 140. So it's like, you're not very good to your body. So it taught me, number one, confidence, but number two, how to structure, my eating and taking care of myself so that I could physically do well. And I think that is a really big deal because it's made it so that my fitness is one of my priorities and the thing I do first every day, so that when I can show up to the rest of my day, I show up as the best version of myself. Yeah. So I think that is really, really vital. And when you get that out of the way and really confront that, you show up better in every area of your life because you've tried some things that are difficult. You've worked hard. You've pushed yourself. You've added structure to your life. And I think fitness is one of the single most beneficial things that anyone can do for their life.
Yeah. I love the confidence piece, especially from a woman's perspective, right? Like they're always felt like they're striving for something. And it's interesting to hear the juxtaposing position of a man who walked through it. My son's in jujitsu and he is forever flashing his 8, 10, whatever, 12 pack that day. And I'm like, dude, we need some humility in this household. Yeah. And so he had his first competition this past weekend and it was going out the gate with the golds. Then he hit the bronze and then they put him into the upper weight class and he was on the mat. He was pinned, right? And watching that from the side, like you're just like so heartbroken. But the very next day we talked about fuel, and he's gluten-free because of intolerances, and we eat like very clean in our house, and he can't stand it because what do most kids want? They want goldfish and all the carbohydrate loads that they could possibly have, and we're like, we don't even have it. Why do we have to eat this all the time, right? So the next day we have this opportunity based on the loss, based on the fail forward experience, for us to then compound and create a new platform of understanding in the nutritional side of things. And so now he knows that the fuel and the fitness, they parallel for us to walk through life.
My 2.5-year-old hasn't really gotten there yet. I'm still trying to convince her to eat things. So we're not quite there yet with her. Daddy, I want hot dog. No, you shouldn't have hot dog. So like, you know what I mean? Like
It's so hard at that age.
we're not quite there yet with my
It's
two and a
still
half year
hard.
old.
Mine are 6 and 8, and I still have those moments where I'm like, just eat it, just have it. It's fine. I'm not fighting it. 80-20 rule. Like, it's good. I'm curious. So we're going to pivot a little bit because I think that there's a huge component of what you do that has evolved out of podcasting. And it's something I'm really in tune with as well, as this understanding of branding. So you shifted from your successes in podcasts into, with your wife, which I absolutely love and want to speak to as well, Command Your Brand. And it's in order to help the entrepreneurs get their messages across and appearing just like this on podcasting. So talk us through how you serve people in that way.
So we really look at ourselves as the PR firm for the podcast space. We had started originally as a full production house, and we realized that a lot of the people we want to work with are super busy, where they're like, hey, a show would be great, but I don't really want to run that whole, gamut of things. So what we actually ended up doing was focusing on like, who do you need to be in front of? How do you need to speak to them? And things like that. So my co-founder is my wife, and she's been in PR for about 12 years. So, my online marketing with her PR side of things, we've really been able to engineer like how a message works and how to get in front of the right people and use a campaign via the podcast space. So that's what we've been doing at Command Your Brand since 2016.
Really cool. So talk us through working with your wife, and where was the ideation phase for that? Was she entrepreneurial before this idea came to be, or she was just in the PR realm?
So she comes from a family that ran a private practice doctor's office for a long time, and so she's always been used to that kind of lifestyle. So that was always something she wanted to create. She's been doing PR for a few different businesses out there, and what we did was always super far apart. Like I said, I was a history teacher, and then she was on the other side being in PR, and we're like, yeah, we're never going to work together. And it was interesting as our paths, sort of started to come together. And honestly, the biggest thing that we had to learn was how to build, run, and manage a team, because that's the way that you're really going to, successfully help your clients. So that's been our biggest focus over the last, 4 years. And we started with, just the two of us, and now we're up to a team of 18. So it's really been, kind of an incredible experience.
Really neat. What resources, or like who do you utilize as a mentor from a leadership perspective?
So it depends, because I have different.
Uh-oh. No, it's frozen. All right, you guys, I think I'm live, but I don't see him. Oh no. He was just getting into the juicy stuff too. Pause. Jeremy, are you there? Oh, he's popping back in. I've got good service, so I'll hang out with you guys for a bit. I love podcasting so much. I love teaching podcasting. I never thought of doing it from a PR perspective, though. I really think that there's something to that, because I know how hard it is for me to get on podcasts, which is really surprising. So if that's something that you need, I would highly encourage you to reach out to Jeremy with Command Your Brand. Hopefully he comes back in. It looks like we're still live and hanging out. So as he mentioned, he was on Glenn's show recently, and some other accolades that he has that are pretty impressive is he was named the #1 podcast to listen to by Inc. magazine in 2019, as well as the top influencer by Forbes. And so the Command Your Brand strategy, I think, is pretty epic. And the fact that he's been doing it for 2000 years, since 2016, allows for some pretty grandiose legs in that experience as an entrepreneur, because it's before a lot of people were even focused on podcasting. So to already have that representation is really important. He's not coming back in, but I can keep running here about podcasting. Or how about you guys want to know what it's like to work with your spouse? Because I am in the midst of that. So my husband and I are both entrepreneurs, and we both run two different companies, one of which is HVAC. He's been in the HVAC industry for a really long time. It's very service oriented. Really, he loves it for the people. And I have my coaching company. And so a few years ago, I was getting ready, and I remember listening to Rachel and Dave Hollis, and it was they were on their couples podcast at the time, and they were talking about his transition between his work with Disney, and he was a huge exec and CEO, again, in like a 401k sturdy foundation of business. And she was an entrepreneur and running all the things, and also obviously running into some great success based on her decade, if not decade and a half of work. So similar age bracket, honestly, to where I am right now with my husband. And so when I was listening to this podcast, they were talking about him stepping out of a full-time position into the CEO position of his business, of her business, I'm sorry. And she was stepping down from CEO into like the visionary role, which is something I am really passionate about and really want to do because that's where I thrive. My coach actually taught me about wealth dynamics, and it's a test that I would really encourage you guys to try and take. And the intent of it is that you take this test, no different than like a personality test, but it actually teaches and trains you how you become most affluent and how you create your wealth in these specific categories, and then also who you need alongside you in order to make those work. So I took my wealth dynamics. I am what they call a star, and I like to be on camera, and I like to share, and I like to teach. Yay, he's back.
Sorry,
there you are.
We had a power outage.
Oh, that's crazy.
I came back on.
No problem. All right. So you were literally getting into.
So you were saying that you were saying who do I come to for leadership?
Yes, let's go.
And then I was saying, and then I realized I was talking to myself for a second. So it depends.
Your frozen picture was nice, though. You got lucky with that.
Well, it depends on like what I'm looking for leadership in, right? I have different people I go to for different things. So like if it's from, like a business perspective, I have one person I go to, whereas I have a huge mentor from the PR world, which is a guy named David Breyer. He's smart in branding and marketing and PR and everything like that. So I tend to get a lot of his viewpoints on things. But like there's so many different people I go to for different things. I'm not like, I think some people have like a be all end all person they go to, but it depends on what topic I go to. It depends on like who I'm going to go to.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that literally talks right back to what we were sharing before, is like a wealth of knowledge from a lot of different backgrounds to be able to then have a lot of different types of conversations, travel the world, and have those expressions of culture and understanding them from a different lens. Now that you and your wife are working together and seeming so with a 2.5-year-old, tell me
and a 4-month-old.
And a 4-month-old.
That's why I was actually like 2 minutes late on you to start here, because I realized I was trying to make my 4-month-old laugh, and I didn't realize what time it was.
Hey, the sweeter things in life, right? You can't replace those moments. So tell me about that role, that run of entrepreneurship and family. And I don't believe in the word balance, but if that's what you want to use, go for it.
I don't believe in the word balance either. Like you know what I mean? It's so hard, right? Because especially when you're in business together, and it just there really isn't the barrier that people think there is there. So what we've tried to do is build our life and business together, right? Like and build those two things together. So like not that we've been able to travel much recently, but whenever I've traveled for speaking, like we've done family trips around it. We did a 5-city tour of Europe in 2019 when I spoke in Ukraine, which was really, really cool. So we've tried to do those type of things. And the thing we've tried to get better at now is we didn't always have like executive level people in our business. So because of that, a lot of problems and issues and things to handle came back to my wife and myself. Right. So what we've really done now is we started to build an executive team so that, we can have more time to do things. We can have more time to function as a family. But especially when you're building a, small, fast growing business, it takes a lot of your time. So you have to get smart and strategic with what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Yeah. Where do you feel like the most like tension points are? Does she have a strength, or I'm sure you guys have strengths and weaknesses that are different, but is there like a tension point in the business where you're like, I don't see eye to eye there?
No, really. we tend to see eye to eye on most things. It's just that realizing like where one person's good and the other person's not. Like she knows not to put me on the phone with a client or somebody that's upset, because I may strangle them through the phone. Whereas if a really important email needs to get written, I'm very, very good at that, you know? So it's like, it's realizing where your strengths are and where somebody else's are and kind of letting them do their thing and not getting in the way.
Yeah, really good. I was talking when you popped off about a podcast that I had heard, and the podcast was talking about how the male of the husband was moving from a 30-year career with Disney and becoming the CEO of what was like an influencer perspective type of business.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be familiar with Dave and Rachel Hollis at the
Oh
time.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I was listening to this podcast and he was just making this big leap and transition into that role. And I remember like weeping because I realized like I am not intended to be the CEO and carry all of these things. I am more like the visionary, the creative, this, putting the information out there and saying yes, but I need that executive role. And my husband is also an entrepreneur. And so he's constantly not only mentoring me because he's a few years ahead of me in his business, but also coming in, I see him coming in eventually and being like, yes, no, right? Because I'll just run. I'm like, let's happen. So I think it's really interesting. And a lot of people, just even last week, I was going on a date night with my husband, and my mom said, don't talk about business. And I was like, Mom, you don't know our relationship. Like, we love that.
It's
like
so hard to not do that.
Of who we are. Yeah.
Hey, and if you do it well enough, it could be a write-off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's an executive meeting, right? Like, it depends, you know?
This is so true. And now, and as your kids get bigger too, you'll understand. I'll be curious to see how you integrate entrepreneurship and your life with them. Because my kiddo started a business during COVID.
Well, I think the thing that we're going to have to figure out is, and I don't know where you stand on this, but I'm not super excited about the public school system anymore. A little bit concerned, honestly. So we're looking at homeschooling as well. So that's something we're going to have to figure out. Like, do we get tutoring help? Will we be, because she's almost 3, so it's like we got a couple years yet till we figure out, will we be in a place where we can do more of that ourselves? So that's something, we personally have to figure out, but I am terrified of the school system.
I
survived it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm a product of it, and me and my husband are always like, we thought we turned out all right, but 100%, our kids are in an alternative education area, which is called it's an independent school, so it's not private, and it's like very experiential, very hands-on. They're out in the garden, they're getting dirty. Like I want them to have those experiences where they're not sitting at a desk and they're usually on a play mat, or they're doing all the different things. Right. And same for me, I have that huge value system. And so financially, we never thought that we would be doing that. But we had some non-negotiables. And as we saw them thrive when they were little, it was the same exact investment for them to go to childcare or to their experiential education when they were young as it was for them to go to this independent school. And unlike most people who were just like, I'm ready to recoup the investment of their daycare, we were ready to invest more at that point when we saw how much they thrived in that type of environment. So we're super grateful that they're in school and learning in a different type of education. But homeschool, I tried during COVID. Didn't pan out so well. I'm a really good teacher to other people's children. But when my child is like Mowgli and sits with both feet like in a squatting position with no shirt on and doesn't want to brush his teeth on the kitchen table.
Oh my. We had friends over for the 4th of July this year, and we're just like potty training currently. And my daughter just decided one day that she was going to potty train herself because we had one of those like my size potties. But we're all sitting down to eat, and all of a sudden, my 2-year-old walks over by the barbecue grill, pulls down her pants, and just starts pooping. And my friend goes, "Oh my God, this makes everything worth it. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen." But like, I get it. I get the whole Mowgli thing. Like, I get it.
It is. It's ridiculous. And like the school, like Zoom is trying to like, everyone needs to have a shirt on. And I'm like, do you want to come parent my child? Because that's not going to happen. And honestly, as long as he's paying attention, do you really, really care? So it was an interesting experience, and I'm grateful they have a home to call school, but also very grateful that it's outside of the public school system, which is really sad because I have a lot of friends who are public school teachers, and I know that their hearts and what they advocate for and how they teach and all of those things have good intent. It's the system, right?
Yeah, because I know, like, for myself, like on a really serious note, like I was always a really smart kid in school. Like, I had a high IQ young. I would finish stuff quickly because I was just super literate. Like, not to toot my own horn, it's just how I was.
Yeah.
But like,
You already told yourself that you weren't smart earlier, so you've counterbalanced.
yeah, there we go. So like, but like, I would finish all my work really fast. So they're like, oh, we're going to put him in the talented and gifted program. My parents are like, wow, that sounds great, for smart kids. So what they did is they just gave me longer projects, not harder projects. And eventually I realized it was dumb. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to just do more work because you want to keep me busy. Like, challenge me.
Yeah.
So they had a meeting with my parents and they're like, so unless he goes on prescription drugs, he can't stay in school. So I just like that has always terrified me. And I just don't want that experience for my kids. I want, whether it's a homeschool or a specialized learning program or whatever it may be, I want them to be challenged and I want them to, really have their skills worked on, not be told, all right, so we're going to drug them because we can't handle your kid.
Yeah. And honestly, I've been battling that actually a couple of years ago, specifically with my son, and they wanted the testing and all of these things. And I didn't do it. I'd never followed through. And there was a lot of conversations about it. And there's even like some components of guilt because I have other people who are now adults who are just finding out that they have ADHD or that they need prescription or any of these things. And
it's my superpower. It's why I can do 10 things at once and do them well.
That's it. Do you know Fanzo? Do you know he's a
I know Brian Fanzo, yeah.
Okay, so he's from hometown here. And he just had this whole conversation on Clubhouse about that experience for himself. And it was like, it's his superpower. That's what he says. And it's
if you channel it correctly is an incredible thing to have because I can do 5 things at once and do them well because it's just how my crazy little brain is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think my husband has it too. Never been diagnosed, but he talks about it all the time because he can do the same thing. I'm like, why do you have 5 projects happening? And he's like, I get bored with this one, but that one's doing good. And then I'll pop over here in a little bit. I'm like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. But I think it's important because when you're looking at it from the perspective of a little being, right? Like, how do you then channel that energy and what is most effective for them? Jiu-jitsu has been an amazing thing for him. He always still says that recess and lunch are his favorite, and he's not into school at all. But we've given him and armored him with tools that he is actually succeeding and doing really well. He just doesn't like it. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to say a couple more things because we're going to close in on the hour here. And first off, thanks for being here. I'm honored to know you and super excited to get in tune with your PR piece because I don't think I realized from the branding perspective, I immediately attached it to like digital media, right? And how you're kidding somebody from a forward-facing perspective. But I believe voice is so critical and podcasting is massive. I think it's why Clubhouse has been so successful in the voice connection with people. So talk us through like your perspective on niching into this podcasting realm.
Well, I'll say right now, like there's no other place, you mentioned Clubhouse, other than Clubhouse, that you can really have long form conversations, which is incredible. Like, because if you're on TV, if you're in any of the other places, like it's such a small snippet. It's a tiny snippet of something you're going to have. So it's an incredible medium in that way. And there's a really great opportunity to build a brand there. And the thing I'm going to say to that, though, is I don't think everyone's equipped to have a podcast because you have people that are like, so my audience is everyone and I teach them how to do everything. Well, good luck finding everyone with everything. You have to really niche down. It's really important to figure out exactly who you serve, how you serve them, and what you discuss. Now, here's the thing that you want to take a look at that with, though. I think some people kind of like put it on a pedestal and they're like, all right, this is all I do. Well, here's the thing, like as a person, you're always growing, right? Like you may find the topics you cover change. You may find the audience you serve changes, and that's fine. But you have to be willing to kind of go through that development. And so I think if you can niche down, if you could be okay with the process, if you could continue to grow, you're going to do really, really well in the podcast space. But if you're somebody that's going to get 2 months into this and be like, why haven't I made $1 million podcasting yet? This is probably not the right place for you, honestly. But it's an incredible opportunity to people that realize this is an incredible networking tool. It's an incredible way to chat with people and an incredible way to connect with a lot of people you never really would have the time of day to connect with,
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell people that it's one of my favorite things that I do on a consistent basis that I make time for because it's quality information. Nothing else is distracting me, right? Unless there's an ambulance that drives by, but it's really just like you and I having this conversation. And my intent is always with these conversations beyond just like, what can I learn and how can I grow, but how can I serve? And I think that's full circle to how we were having our conversation at the beginning. And so understanding that like as you were saying, everyone to everything, I imagined like a blank cursor in Google, because no different than searching on YouTube or searching on Google, people search podcasts, right? They want the information, they search the topic. And if you're blank and you're typing everyone and everything on Google, imagine what you're going to get. And so I love that you believe in that perspective. I also think that there is that margin for not only growth, but expansion as you expand your audience. And I have loved it. I think it's such a fun way to show up in the world uniquely, and also to give you a lot of really great content.
No, I agree, because I know, like, even for me, the reason I started the podcast is because I was an academic writer. So good luck with anybody trying to understand anything I was saying. So it really opens the opportunity to a lot of people that can have incredible conversations, but then figuring out how to use that content in different ways, right? Like, you can use one interview that you spend a half hour on, for a couple of years, if you figure out how to use that content in different ways, especially if it's video.
Yeah, really, especially with its video. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is like the whole vodcasting world, right? I was doing a presentation with Podfest, and like most people don't do video because they're doing this for
I didn't for the first 3 years.
Really? See, I went right into it, but it was also, it would have been when you started is when I started in the video realm. And it was only because of Joe Rogan. My husband's a huge Joe Rogan fan. And so I was always watching him watch him. And I'm like, it's so weird that you sit on somebody's conversation like that for so long, talking about everything and everyone. And he can do that, but he's been doing it a lot longer than me. So I get it.
It's funny because you were talking about people that have way too many ads in their episodes before. And actually, the thing that came to mind was Joe Rogan's show, because now on Spotify, it's so hard to get past the 10 minutes of ads in the beginning before you can hear anything. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, he actually has stopped watching the long form content, and he just watches the clips on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I can't do it. I'm intentional with my time. I can't listen to ads, which is a bummer. But he still loves him, so that's good. So it's been amazing, Jeremy, having you here. I would love, is there any like final tidbits of things that you want to share, specifically to circle back to the beginning of the conversation when you said your purpose doesn't slap you in your face? We've heard about your journey, and I think other people are encouraged by that.
Well, there's one book out there that everyone should read, and it's called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And Cal talks about the idea of finding is not to chase your passion, but find something you're good at and continue to get better and better and better at it. And that's when passion comes in. So passion never comes first. It comes at finding a skill and continuing to improve that skill. So I would definitely check out that book.
Really good. Thank you so much for that. And if they want to get in touch with you, where do you hang most besides your podcast, or is that where you're at?
So I'm at Jeremy Ryan Slate on all major platforms, and I'm over at jeremyryanslate.com.
Awesome. And then you guys go tune in to Create Your Life podcast. And if you need help in the PR realm, Command Your Brand, all the links are provided here. And we're excited to connect with you further. Me specifically, when you were offline, I was like, I think I need his services. So I'll be reaching out. Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Have an awesome day.